Did she?
Oh, then I'm too close. And she loved it.
Move the bench back.
Right, watch out.
Is that okay?
That needs to be kind of in the middle. I think that's all right.
Okay.
Good. Now, look through that cookie strips.
You're going to have to edit this, aren't you? My bad back means I have to sit like this. That's all right.
That's right, Alexander. So here we are in the orchards of the Bleddfa Centre, and we've just had a lovely Q&A from Cindylou following on from her performance of Genesis last night. And Cindylou, first of all, thank you for the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for the wise words of wisdom and inspiration that you gave our students. There's one of them there.
Yeah.
There's something that you started to talk about that I'm really interested in, and that is the fact that storytelling, the process, and being a storyteller involves quite a lot of slow burn.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just talk about that for a bit.
Sometimes stories come really fast. When we
Yes,
were talking
you were talking about something that has never happened to me.
Out. They just drop in, whole, complete, born, perfect. No gestation time, just a gift. But most of them, it's a hard slog. And I think the ones that are really, really rich take years. Well, for me, they take years.
And how did that work with the Genesis show?
Well, I first told Genesis, I was thinking about that actually in there. I first told Genesis in 2012.
Yeah.
When it was just quite a literal, scriptural story. God was changed into female, the snake was a messenger, that bit was there, but there was no real finesse to it. It was, and it was all about performance then. So I was on a performance course, so it was all about the timing and the resonance of your voice and audience gaze and all those technical things. But then I started to be more interested in her story and how she changed from being an innocent, somebody unknowing, who was just sensing and experiencing the world. And as an early years teacher, that's what children up to about 3, 4 do. Their whole world is about sensing and experience, and it's experiential, and they get stuck into the mud, and that's what they do. But in the Eve story, there is that moment when she shifts into self-awareness, and she realises she has power beyond measure. And then she wants to share that with Adam, and then when Adam gets it, and then all the complications that come with that power and the shame and the guilt, and then the beginning, that journey of integrating it, I suppose. And then when I came here with the story, which would have been about 2 years later, I was much happier with the Eve relationship, with the snake, with God, with the garden. Everything was working out really well. But it was still too sweet. And it was almost a children's story, and it needed to have more power in it. And I couldn't find it. And then I came here again, and that time it became really obvious. I knew exactly who needed to be in there. I knew it needed to be Hagar, because she's also in Genesis. She's one of the few named women in Genesis, but she's a woman who turns her sexual experience, and one that's quite violent and quite awful, into a positive thing. And the only way to get to that was to try and get back to her time in my head. So if I came from that story as a 21st century woman, Me Too movement, I'd be singing, she's been abused, it's terrible, her father and Abraham, they need to be locked up. Actually, let's look at that differently. Let's go back into that culture and see how women interpreted their own lives and their own experience. And I couldn't find a way in until I found 2 women doctors, PhD type doctors, not medical doctors, talking about Hagar and the Hadith story that's about Hagar. And then they told the story, and suddenly I really realised, actually, Hagar is a prophet or a prophetess. She has a divine message within this story about acceptance and about, I suppose in a way, the futility of fighting when there's no point fighting, and that there comes a point where you have to accept your lot and and deal with it, because otherwise you'll hurt yourself and nobody else. And she comes to a place of acceptance, and as a result of that, she doesn't just birth a son, she births a nation.
Yes.
And to go from that feeling of subjugation and nothingness and being invisible to being the founder of Mecca, the mother of Islam, is an amazing journey. And to think, and when I've told it to Muslim women, and they've actually talked, they've walked between those two hills, and that even now it gives me goosebumps. I didn't even know they existed, because in my tradition, the Christian tradition, Hagar is a whore. She's a weak whore who goes in and behaves badly and gets what she deserves because she's a whore. But in the Muslim tradition, she is sacred. She is powerful beyond measure, and she does the most amazing things. And she's the first theologian, the first person to name God in any written record that we have.
Wow.
She names God as the one who sees. And she's the first person to do that. And that, and it's interesting to come from a tradition that in my tradition we see a lot of our culture sees Islam as very anti-women and very very misogynistic, and yet when you actually dig down into the real meat and bones of it, it's actually exactly the opposite. Women are the powerhouse behind them.
We talked a lot about the graft and the beavering away that storytellers have to do. I'd just like to ask you to reflect on how the community of Bleddfa, or the kind of morphing, changing community of Bleddfa, because sometimes people come back and they meet the same people within the context of people they didn't know, or maybe they know people who have come from other contexts. What is, for you, the value of a storytelling community of practice like we have here?
I've actually talked about this to a lot of storytellers, and one who shall remain nameless said to me, "Cindylou, why are you going to Bleddfa? There's people that don't know about storytelling. It's way beneath you." And I said to her, "I think you're missing a trick there, because what you have, apart from Albert's tractor, hi Albert, apart from the tractors going up the road, what you have in Bleddfa is a very small little group of people, some of whom have absolutely no experience of story, some of whom are accomplished professionals. I mean, I've been here with people who've got multiple PhDs in storytelling, like real brain boxes when it comes to storytelling. People with amazing repertoires, people who have never told stories, as I've said before. And when you put that together, you get this kind of, it's like a melting pot. It's so rich. You get so many different viewpoints and insights. You watch people learn, people make progress, people don't make progress, people struggle, people can't get it, but we're all held together in this. And I know you don't like me saying things like this, but it's because you and Hazel hold it so safely.
Thank you.
And I think it's a really powerful place. I don't think there's anywhere better, and I consider it my studio and my workshop.
That's an interesting way of seeing it, as a kind of a place of...
It's like a writer's retreat. That's how it functions for me.
Great.
I come here with a story that I know I want to tell, but I know I just cannot do it on my own. I can't sort it out. And you said that once, why do we think we can do this on our own? We just can't.
No,
this is a team
It's too
game.
big. It's too big.
Yeah, it's a community game,
Yeah.
and you need a community. And this is, geographically, this is a super space. It's so quiet, it's so away from everything. It's so stunningly beautiful, and it's so old.
Yeah.
So when you're walking this land, you know people have walked this land for thousands of years, and one day there were bears here in the past. Which is how it got its name.
I think you've actually answered one of the questions.
Oh, have I?
But the other thing is the thing that you said, you were very clear about it. There's almost a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a catchphrase or a kind of superficial thing that people say is that humans are the storytelling animal kind of thing. And it's something that's just said. But when we were having our conversation in there with the group, you were very, very clear. There was a discussion about that, and you were very, very clear that to tell a story is to be human, and to be human is to is to tell a story. I was wondering if you could briefly say something
Yeah,
about that.
I don't think the two are separable. People often talk about stories, particularly now. There's a fashion for calling everything narrative arts. And I'm a storyteller because I've taken 5 photos and put them in a line. And that is great. And it's, it's lovely. And it's a narrative form of visual imaging. But it's not storytelling. Storytelling has to involve the voice or sign language. It's about live interactions between human beings. And we do it all the time. We cannot not do it. When, as a grandparent, I've watched my grandchildren get interested in storytelling, and neurologically it happens at about 4 months, and it's called the event stage, and that's when they start to see an event like a hand lifting has a beginning, middle and end. The hand is here, the hand moves, the hand is here. That's a story. So that's, and and children stop, they go have disrupted sleep at about 4 months, because that's what's happening between 12 and 4 months, 12 weeks and 16 weeks. And it's amazing to watch that actually happening. And then those stories just get more and more complex as we go through life. If you want a cup of tea, you need to know the story of making a cup of tea. You need to know you've got to make that water hot somehow. You need to have a vessel. I mean, making a cup of tea is a massively complex, cooperative, interdisciplinary story. We buy a car. We don't just go and buy a car. Somebody's designed that car. Somebody's made that car. They've done it on trust. And there's a massive story behind buying a car. And it's in everything we do, and it's in every step we take. We cannot exist without stories, because we are rarely purely instinctive. If you look at a cat, I really don't think my cat tells stories in her head. She's entirely instinctive. Put a cucumber beside a cat, it jumps through the roof because it thinks it's a snake. That's an entirely instinctive response. So it's operating on a different system in the body and in the neurology.
Interesting. You know what you've done by talking about tea, don't you?
Oh, I've made you thirsty.
Yeah. So, I think I'm going to we'll go and put the kettle on now. Cindylou, thank you
cake.
so... And cake, of
Cake.
course. Bleddfa wouldn't be Bleddfa without cake.
No, it wouldn't be.
Essential
It wouldn't
ingredient.
be.
Cindylou, thank you so much for talking to me about storytelling.
Thank you.
And welcome back to Bleddfa.
And thank you for bringing me back to lovely Bleddfa.
Very good.
Edit that away. I like your